Let's start, though, with Ukraine, where there is still plenty of diplomatic action. This morning, the United States joined Sir Keir Starmer and European leaders of the Coalition of the Willing, as they're calling it, to discuss the prospect of several thousand troops being put on the ground in Ukraine, should there be a peace deal, as a reassurance force. Yesterday, we saw the fallout from the diplomatic dance in Washington that Trump had orchestrated. There was Trump and Zelensky making nice, then Zelensky's European mates backing him up. So is the road now open to a Putin-Zelensky meeting? And is the US really ready to sign up for security guarantees for Ukraine? What would they look like? Are we actually any closer to seeing an end to the war in Ukraine? Well, let's talk to the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Thomas Pickering, to unpick some of this. Ambassador Pickering, let's begin with how you feel after Trump hosting Zelensky, all those European leaders yesterday. Do you think it is credible now to believe we've begun down a path to peace?
Thank you, Stephen. Good afternoon. I think that it is possible to find elements, not of optimism, but of positivism, if I could say that, in the events of yesterday. Certainly, the 7 European leaders gathered around Zelensky gave, I think, President Trump a lesson in modern diplomacy. While his comments were all what I have achieved as President Trump, theirs were all basically what we need to do, united, to bring about a situation in which the human tragedy of Ukraine stops, the fighting stops, and we move in the direction, hopefully, of a peace agreement with all of the barriers and difficulties outlined, beginning with the major question of what is it that those who support President Zelensky can do to provide the kind of security guarantees which can help him deal with what is expected to be, by all of us, a very bumpy question of how and in what way territorial division, NATO presence, and so on have to be dealt with in the fine details of an agreement that's just pending in the minds of people and on the basic principles statements far yet from something that is cogent in writing, set down, discussable.
So let's go through this bit by bit. Let's start with the territorial issue, the land issue, and then we'll get to the so-called reassurance force and security guarantees. But on this basic question of a deal on land, seems to me there's still something deeply intractable here, because Putin has made it plain he wants every single inch of the Donbass, which includes all of Donetsk region. Now, almost a third of that is currently still under Ukrainian control and is strategically vital to Ukrainian defense, and Zelensky is not going to give it up. In your view, is there a solution, a way around that?
There are always solutions. The real question is, are they acceptable solutions? And I think that's what you're asking. And we're in a situation now where the basic division is Russia's aspirations for all of Ukraine and perhaps beyond at the beginning of its invasion in February of 2022. And Zelensky's commitment as the constitutional leader of Ukraine to fight against the aggressive occupation of his territory and to do everything he can to preserve it all. There are many discussions going on now. Could Crimea be something the Russians get delivered in return for some concession to Zelensky? There are other questions. Certainly, the unoccupied piece of Donetsk at the corner with the Lugansk Oblast is a particularly strategic piece of military territory, because if Russia were to get it, it doesn't occupy it now, it would put it pretty close down the road toward Kiev. And that would make even more important the second question you've raised, What is it that the allies of Ukraine are prepared to commit in specific terms to support it if Russia breaks the deal and invades again? And I was around in Moscow as ambassador when the so-called Budapest Agreement was negotiated, when the Ukrainians gave up their nuclear weapons, something that I think they rue the day of
Well,
having done.
of course they
Yeah.
do, because they basically gave up their nukes in return for security guarantees, a promise made to maintain the sovereignty of all of their territory, which included the Russians. And of course, that wasn't worth the paper it was written on, as we now know.
Oh,
So
you've nailed it, and you know exactly what President Zelensky is thinking
So
about all
yeah,
of
so
this.
so here's the thing, and actually, I'm just looking at some breaking news in the last few minutes. Donald Trump apparently has just said, I don't know whether it was on social media or what, but he's just indicated that he believes Ukraine should never have asked to be in NATO. Now, that's significant. It's not new in some ways, but it's significant because the discussion right now is the degree to which the Americans are prepared to back security guarantees in the future for Ukraine, and what those security guarantees would actually, in real terms, mean. Would it mean a form of collective defense, a sort of NATO-like deal, which America would very much sign up to? Do you think Trump is prepared to sign up to it?
I think we're in a negotiating stage. Trump has moved a bit over the no, no, never line into the question of, yes, we can consider it in support of the Europeans who are, put it this way, very much in favor of doing that because they see that as wisely. I think one of the key questions that must be resolved to bring into place, if not a ceasefire, and that's been a dispute, certainly a peace arrangement that can satisfy Ukraine's needs, that it's moving in a dangerous direction, but with the full backing of the international community insofar as that can be achieved, and that it will work. And that will take a lot of hard negotiating and staff work to get done.
Let me ask you something as a very experienced diplomat. Is there a consistency and reliability problem here as far as Zelensky and the Europeans are concerned when they're dealing with Donald Trump? Because let's face it, on a whole range of issues, whether it be tariffs, whether it be a whole bunch of other things, Donald Trump changes his mind. He flip-flops quite a lot. One thing Vladimir Putin never seems to do is fundamentally change his mind. I mean, his position on what he wants out of Ukraine, which is pretty much total control, that hasn't changed since February of 2022. Trump does change. How much of a problem is his lack of consistency?
A serious problem. And certainly that is something that people have very much in mind. He was not necessarily responsible for the failure to back up the Budapest communique. And that is a pattern that I'm obviously sure Ukrainians are very worried about. So this is a key question. It is not easily solved, as you point out. Trump's behavior, the mercurial, chaotic behavior that you see, change your mind every time you run into difficulty, and often do it for the worse, is a very difficult question for foreign countries to deal with. And it has led, as you know, to the beginning of the decline of American major political influence in the international community. Trump fights against this, but the actions of the seven coming here yesterday and sitting in the White House behind President Zelensky to support him is another, I think, ratification of that conclusion.
Finally and briefly, Ambassador, to use a metaphor that Trump loves in terms of who holds the cards, what's your reading of where we are today with all of this diplomacy continuing? Who, in your view, holds the strongest cards today?
I think backed up by a stronger military force, President Putin seems to be in a stronger position. The fact that he has at least seemingly slid a little bit in the direction of a negotiated solution, a little bit in the direction of maybe he could negotiate over territory, a little bit in the direction, not much, that a ceasefire is not totally ruled out, a little bit in the direction of maybe there can be a meeting with President Zelensky, as President Trump outlines, are all things that have to be
Do you
exploited
actually,
by
in the current,
diplomacy.
looking at things right now, do you actually think that meeting is going to happen? I mean, I think Putin has got
I
grave doubts about whether it's in his interest.
I had my doubts that the meetings over the weekend would turn out well. I still do. I have my doubts that that meeting will happen, but I have no doubt at all that it's totally important to try to exploit what little openings exist to make that happen.
All
It
right.
has much more promise than continued conflict.
All right. Well, Ambassador Thomas Pickering, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for joining us on The Times at 1.
Thank
Now,
you, Stephen.